my motto, nothing's ever holding back.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Lone Road iRacing podcast with me, Guy Robertson. This week we're diving into a topic that sits right at the centre of modern motorsport culture. A topic that 10 years ago sounded almost ridiculous. But today it has become very, very real. Can sim racers actually become real-world racing drivers? Can sitting in your spare room, battling through rain at Spa, chaos at Monza, or surviving lap 1 at Daytona actually prepare someone for a real cockpit? And more importantly, could it happen to you? Now, before some old school petrol soap motorsport purist throws a torque wrench across the paddock screaming sim racing isn't real racing, let's just pause for a moment and look at what has actually happened over the last decade. We've seen multiple sim racers move into genuine professional motorsport, and we're not talking track days. Not my mate owns an MX-5 and let me drive it around Brands Hatch. We're talking proper racing careers. GT racing, endurance racing, single-seaters, manufacturer contracts, Le Mans, international competition. And it all started with a simulator. Today we're going to explore what skills transfer from sim to real world, what absolutely doesn't, the emotional and financial realities, and we'll deep dive into two of the biggest sim to real success stories motorsport has ever seen. Because whether you're a 1.2k iRacer in the MX-5s or a 6k Alien driving prototypes, I guarantee at some point you've just wondered, what would happen if I actually got into a real race car? And honestly, that dream is no longer fantasy. It's just hidden behind layers of opportunity, money, dedication, pressure, and probably a terrifying amount of tyre bills. So grab yourself a coffee, strap into the rig, and let's talk about how virtual racing escaped the monitor and rolled directly into real motorsport. Years ago, sim racers were often viewed as gamers pretending to be drivers. And to be fair, early racing games didn't help. Cars bounced off barriers like pinballs, tyres had the grip characteristics of melted chewing gum, and damaged models usually meant losing a bumper and continuing at full speed. But things changed. Simulators evolved, and platforms like iRacing changed the perception completely. Laser scan circuits, tyre modelling, dynamic weather, and real-world telemetry, professional drivers using simulators for training. Suddenly, the line between gaming and motorsport started to blur. Then came esports, big prize pools, manufacturer-backed competitions, professional teams scouting talent, and slowly, quietly, something remarkable happened. Real racing drivers started admitting something many traditionalists hated hearing. Sim racing genuinely helps. Not all of it, not perfectly, but undeniably. Today, nearly every major racing driver spends time in simulators. Formula 1 teams use them, GT teams use them, endurance teams also use them. Because the modern race car is almost too complicated not to use simulation. Track learning alone becomes revolutionary. Imagine arriving at a circuit you've never visited before, except you already know braking markers, corner camber, curb behaviour, pit entry and racing lines. That's an enormous advantage, and younger generations entering motorsport today actually have grown up on simulators. To them, this isn't unusual, it's the norm. The old divide between real racers and sim racers is collapsing faster than a cold tyre at Sebring. So what skills actually transfer? This is a huge question, because some people still think sim racers are just memorising tracks and pressing buttons, but the reality is far deeper. Let's start with what absolutely does transfer. Racecraft, and this is massive. Understanding overtaking, defending, positioning, creating pressure, avoiding incidents and predicting driver behaviour. These are mental skills, and sim racing develops them incredibly well. If you've survived multi-class traffic at Daytona at 3 a.m. during a special event, your brain has already developed serious situational awareness. Consistency is another major skill that is needed. Professional racing is not about one fast lap. It's about repeating good laps over and over while under pressure. Sim racing teaches this beautifully, especially endurance racing. Anyone can drive 3 good laps, but can you drive 30 good laps while managing tyres, dealing with traffic, staying calm and adjusting strategy? That transfers directly. Learning under pressure, and this is underrated. Sim racers constantly have to adapt with weather changes, incidents, damage, fuel strategies, safety cars, split-second decisions. That mental processing speed becomes incredibly valuable. What about car control? Now this is where some people may get angry, because sim racing absolutely develops car control. Counter steering, weight transfer understanding, trail braking concepts and throttle modulation. These things are real, but yes, there are limits. So what doesn't transfer? And this is where reality punches through the monitor. G-forces. No simulator can truly prepare you for the physical forces on your neck, your core or your arms. Real race cars are violent. Even GT cars can feel brutal to newcomers. Drivers often describe their first proper race experience as shocking, because your body simply isn't prepared. Then there's the fear factor. This is the biggest difference. In sim racing, as we all know, we crash, we tow, and we all complain about netcode. In real racing, if you crash, it's gonna hurt. It can end careers, it can destroy cars, and it definitely injures people. That psychological layer changes everything. Corners suddenly feel different when consequences become real. Now, in real world racing, you've got heat and fatigue. Real race cars are like ovens, especially endurance racing. The concentration required while physically exhausted is enormous. Some drivers lose several kilograms during races. Your 400-pound fan put in at your rig sadly doesn't replicate that particular apocalypse. Now, we're going to look now at arguably one of the most famous sim-to-real stories ever told. And it's the story of Jann Mardenborough. And honestly, if Hollywood had written this script, people would say it was unrealistic. Jann grew up in Britain and loved racing games. But here's the important part. He wasn't part of a wealthy karting family. He wasn't progressing through junior formulas. He wasn't living the traditional motorsport dream. Like many young people, motorsport simply looked financially impossible. And this is where everything changed. In 2008, Nissan and PlayStation launched something revolutionary, GT Academy. The idea sounded almost absurd at the time. Take Gran Turismo players and turn one into a real racing driver. Most people laughed. Traditional motorsport media mocked it. Real-world drivers mocked it. Race fans mocked it. A gamer becoming a racing driver, impossible. But then came Jann. In 2011 he entered GT Academy. Thousands of people signed up and competed. And Jann won. That victory completely changed his life. But here's where the real story begins. Because winning a competition is one thing. Actually surviving real motorsport is another. That transition was brutal. Physical training, media pressure, professional expectations, and real danger. Everything changed overnight. Yet, remarkably, Jann adapted incredibly quickly. And I hear you say, why and how did he manage that? Because many of the core skills already existed. He had his racecraft, his understanding of racing lines, his braking discipline, and his spatial awareness. Those foundations had built virtually everything, and soon he started proving people wrong. Again and again and again. He raced in GT racing, Formula 3, GP3, Super GT, and endurance racing, and even eventually driving in the Le Mans. That alone changed motorsport history, because suddenly nobody could say sim racers weren't real drivers anymore. One literally made it to one of the biggest racers on this planet. But Jann's story also contains tragedy and realism. In 2015, he suffered a horrific crash at the Nürburgring Nordschleife during a VLN race. A spectator sadly also lost their life. And this is important to discuss respectfully because it highlights something crucial. Real motorsport carries emotional weight beyond simulation. Real consequences, real trauma, and real responsibility. Jann carried the burden publicly while continuing his career. And honestly, that takes extraordinary mental resilience. His story isn't just about gaming. It's about adaptation, pressure, expectation, criticism, and proving the impossible is possible. Okay, we're midway through today's episode, and we're going to hear from our sponsor, Outlap. We'll be right back. We're having a quick pause here to mention our sponsor, Outlap, who are supporting the podcast. Outlap is built around the side of sim racing we don't talk about enough. The focus, the preparation, and mental work that happens long before the race actually starts. It's not about hype or loud designs, it's about process, patience, and showing up ready. Whether that's in the rig or stepping away from it. If that side of sim racing resonates with you, you'll find Outlap quietly ticking along in the background. I want to thank Outlap again for sponsoring the podcast, and the link to their sim racing apparel store is in the show notes. Welcome back to the second half of today's podcast, and I just want to thank Outlap again for sponsoring today's podcast. We're now going to move on to James Baldwin, the modern hybrid racer. If Jann Mardenborough opened the door, James Baldwin kicked it wider open. And James represents something very modern. Not just a racing driver and not just a sim racer, but a hybrid motorsport personality. He is and was and continues to be a streamer, a content creator, an esports competitor and a professional racer. James became widely known through sim racing competitions and esports events. But unlike older generations of racers, he grew up in an era where online presence mattered too. Fans watched his development live, they followed his practice, his racing and his reactions. And slowly, the industry began realising something powerful. Sim racers already understood modern motorsport technology incredibly well. Telemetry, data analysis, simulator preparation and driving techniques. These are increasingly essential in professional racing. James went on to race GT cars in the real world and achieve significant success. And what's fascinating is how natural the transition appeared. Not easy, never easy, but natural. Because the foundation again was already there. And this is where motorsport is heading. The future driver may no longer emerge only from karting. They may emerge from esports, simulation, online competition and digital communities. That's a gigantic cultural shift. So the big question, could a normal iRacer do this? Now where's the difficult truth? Most sim racers will never become professional drivers. Not because they lack talent, because motorsport is brutally expensive. And that's reality. But, and this is important, sim racing has opened doors that never existed before. Today there are pathways into grassroots motorsport, club racing, endurance events, karting, coaching, esport teams and manufacturer programs. And many people discover something equally valuable. They simply enjoy sim racing enough on its own. Not every passion must become a career. Sometimes racing at home with friends on a Thursday night is enough. And there's beauty in that too. But if someone did want to try, here's what generally I think matters. Consistency first. Not pace, but consistency. Real motorsport teams love consistency. Anyone can throw one heroic lap together, but can you repeatedly drive cleanly under pressure? Learning racecraft properly. Stop using official races like demolition derbies. Learn patience, prediction and awareness. Fast drivers, yes, they impress people, but smart drivers get opportunities. And fitness matters. This surprises many sim racers. If you generally want real world opportunities, physical training matters massively. Cardio, neck strength, reaction endurance, and professional racing is athletic. Then something that may not be discussed is networking, and this matters more than people realise. Motorsport is a relationship driven. Being professional online helps, building connections helps, and being respectful helps. The angry voice chat warrior screaming in fixed Ferrari probably isn't getting manufacturer support anytime soon. And what about the mental side of this dream? This might be my favourite part of this whole topic today, because sim racing represents something emotionally important for many people, especially adults. Life happens, careers happen, families happen, and money happens. For many of us, real motorsport looked impossible. Then simulation arrived, and suddenly we could compete, we could improve, we can learn, we can challenge ourselves, and we belong to a racing community, and all that matters. And occasionally, for a tiny handful of extraordinary people, it becomes something bigger. A doorway, not because sim racing magically creates racing drivers, but because it allows talent to finally be seen. And that's the revolution. I hope you've really enjoyed the story about sim to real world racing, which is the main topic of today's podcast. If you've got any stories you want to tell us about your journey, if you've made it from sim to reality, please send us some information in the show notes and tell us your story, and maybe become a guest on here and tell us, all the viewers and listeners, about your journey. We'll be right back next with this week's iRacing Agony Uncle. We received another question from another listener for this week's Agony Uncle. He writes, Guy, I'm in my 40s and I've recently become obsessed with sim racing. Join the club. Am I too old to ever try real world motorsport? And honestly, already, absolutely not. Too old for Formula One? Yes, I would say probably. Too old to race? Not remotely. There are people entering karting, MX5 championships, endurance racing, track day championships, hill climbs and club racing. And these drivers are well into their 40s, 50s and beyond. The key is changing the definition of what success looks like. You don't need to become a factory driver, you simply need to experience racing. And sim racing can absolutely help prepare you for that journey. Maybe not physically, maybe not financially, but mentally, technically and strategically. Absolutely, and honestly, the first moment driving a real car on track after years of sim racing, I imagine that must feel like stepping through the monitor itself. So it's only a short Agony Uncle, but realistically, I love racing, iRacing on the sim, but I also go and do karting. I will go and do the F4 experience at Silverstone, for example, Formula Ford I should say. Things like that are definitely available for anybody to go and enjoy it who thinks about having an experience of motorsport. So, to close this section, can sim racers become real world drivers? The answer now is undeniably yes. Not all of them, and it's not easy, and it's not cheap. But that pathway now exists. And every year that connection between virtual and real motorsport becomes stronger. What started as just gaming has evolved into training, competition, scouting, preparation, and sometimes, just sometimes, a genuine career launchpad. And perhaps the most fascinating part, we're probably only at the beginning. Because somewhere right now, some teenager is driving laps on iRacing, completely unknown, completely unnoticed. And 10 years from now, they may be standing on a real podium. And honestly, that's pretty incredible. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Lone Road iRacing podcast. I've been Guy Robertson, and I'll see you next week. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you on the grid. And don't forget to say hello. Happy iRacing.
Whatever it takes, we're racing, we're in the zone. Whatever it takes, we push hard, never alone. I'm in the cockpit, the engines roar, hear me now. We're racing circles, got a hustle, made a vow. Chasing victory, it's all or nothing on the track. Sweet is my motto, nothing's ever holding back. Whatever it takes, we're racing.